Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome to my overview of Batman Arkham Shadow. So quickly at the front, I usually have a spiel when I do overviews. I look at games for a 2-hour block that's dictated by the Steam refund window. That way I can just get a broad idea and deliver that info to you. Doesn't quite work as a spiel when I'm covering something that's not on Steam. In this case, this is a Meta 3 exclusive VR title. I've just bought a MetaQuest 3 and this came as a pack-in, launch title. I don't know what else you wouldn't call it. I mean, the hardware is not exactly brand new, but it's the newest. But regardless, we're at the point where we're building exclusive titles for the hardware, which has probably drawn some backlash. If you even knew this game existed, this is a totally recognized and official Batman game. So it's got all the stuff that you would have expected from those, detective vision, predator mode, the punching combo mechanics, all that's brought across into VR. So I can understand some people might be a bit miffed that they didn't get this on traditional flat screen hardware or whatever. To which I would probably counter, did you play Suicide Squad? I don't know. Maybe it's time to pick up a headset and check this out because this is really good and it works really well as a standalone thing. I've always been skeptical of the standalone hardware. I do a lot of, I think they would call it tethering, where I will play, on the Quest 2, for example, my previous headset, that's what we looked at Metro Awakening on, where you can make it run natively on your computer's hardware and then essentially relay it through the headset. You get much higher fidelity and quality. However, it's a bit of a accessibility barrier if you're not some sort of elitist. I've got a pretty high-end PC and then the hardware and then setting it all up. Whereas with the Quest 3, it's just a headset. You can put it in your bag, you can take it to your mate's house, pull it out and show them, and you've got Batman running on it. And for that trade-off, for that accessibility, because I love VR. I think VR is really special, but it's always struggled with that hurdle of breaking into mainstream because it is very niche hardware, purpose-built, and quite expensive. So doing this, whether you like it or not, you got to recognize that this is how you break into mainstream. It's where you start scooping up AAA high-profile licenses and making things like single-player AAA experiences, which is what this is. This is in every way a full-fledged, proper single-player experience that's totally native to the hardware. I tested it out just for curiosity's sake, for a giggle, and went and sat in my storage room and sat there with my headset, and I had a gay old time. It was great. So yeah, I'm not a VR channel, but I do cover high-profile releases. And you've got this. I looked at Metro. We've got Aliens coming down the pipeline. You better believe I'm looking at that. That Behemoth game, I'll probably pick that up as well. It's touted as Skyrim, but purpose-built for VR. So yeah, interesting times going on with VR. I also believe, not that I'm a huge market analyst or anything like that, but it's end over end, year over year growth is something ridiculous, like 50%. So VR in its own way is explosive at the moment, and it's kind of cool to see it doing this. Anyway, specifically about this game. Because it's fresh in my mind, there'll be some slight comparisons to Metro Awakening. Something I noticed in Metro Awakening is the design philosophy. It's a purpose-built first-person game, but made from the ground up for VR. And the big reason I don't play a lot of first-person games, well, I get motion sickness, but I just find them a pain because think Resident Evil 7, that wasn't built as a VR game. It was built as like a console PC game and then was later ad hoc'd into VR. And the way you move around that environment, you kind of have a lot more freedom, and it just didn't really translate that well. And it's one of those things I'd rather just put it down and play the flat screen version. Whereas what we saw in Metro Awakening, and maybe this has been happening for a while, but it was new to me because I've only really dipped back in, is the way that the grid sort of world system, like if you were to build in 90-degree grids, all of the corridors are either that or at a 45-degree increment. So say you were walking down a corridor, it's at most going to be 45 or 90 degrees from the previous room or corridor that you came off. So there's a kind of a rigid rule that lines up with the comfort stick rotations. The reason I'm harping on about that is because that made a huge difference for my immersion and my ability to enjoy it and not get sick, especially sitting down playing. And this game is doing the same thing as well. And I can only assume that this is now a bit of a build philosophy, or it should be recognized and noticed. Again, talking to my fellow spewers that maybe don't love VR because of that, or they're apprehensive of it, I'm flying around doing Batman bloody cape jumps and zip lines and all that, and I didn't get crook at all. So it's not just the software comfort game settings, It's the game design that's working. Anyway, the game itself is quintessentially Batman. From aesthetic all the way up to soundtrack. It's got a deceptive, soft, pseudo-open world going on. Like you're moving around through environments and all that, and it lets you go outside into the streets, but it's still kind of on rails. So it's not open world, but you feel it when you go out a door and you go, oh, I'm in the city, right? So it's creating that illusion, which ultimately is all that really matters, not to get into open world theory, but it's a huge jump. It's very cool. Also, and comparing to Metro Awakening, nothing against that, that's wonderful. I kind of like the art direction in a way more in this, as opposed for going hyper-realism, high fidelity. I don't necessarily want that. It might not be something you can really tell by watching a video on the outside looking in. But when you're in VR, stylized graphics can work very well. Like the immersion isn't necessarily what you're seeing on the YouTube low-res video capture. So I really enjoy the art style in this. The textures are a bit low-res, but I feel like that's just the sacrifice you have to make if you're going to do this Quest exclusive jump. But I like the environments. It's a weird statement, but like the width of the corridors and the air vents, the size, it's a bit oversized, which works better. Something you will never understand unless you've played VR is VR characters when you're talking to them cutscenes. They look fine in YouTube capture, but usually through the lens, they kind of look smaller. They look like little berry heads that you could crush with your gigantic Andre the Giant hands. It doesn't quite translate. And I feel like if they did scale up those models and made them a bit more realistic for the viewer, they would look ridiculous in YouTube captured footage. Most of this game works really well. There's some incredibly clever stuff, like you can climb up ladders, but you can also use your little bat zip line thing to go up, and that works very well. You can also fly down, you pull, I'm using my arms, you lift your arms out to the side and pull triggers and you can fly down on the cape. It's very cool. It feels great. You can put your hand up and touch the side of your head to turn on detective vision. Even going in and out of grates, like you grab the grate and move it. All these little things, again, I talked about this in Metro Awakening. It's usually the stuff peripheral to what you would call the core loop and experience is what really makes VR tick, is the little fiddly touching things, pulling things out of pockets, that sort of stuff. That's where they really shine. And this game's got it all, which is fascinating because it's not a shooter. Instead, it's a brawler, and that works okay. It's fine, it's all right, but like if you were going to say compare it to Metro Awakening, shooting, loading guns and all that, it's not nearly as good, but it's still pretty awesome. So essentially you just 1-2 punch, just throw your little punches. I must look like the most spurred person sitting in the middle of my office swinging my arms around. And then you can do counters where you just sort of swing your arm in the direction off screen potentially, and it re-centers you to that dude and you can fight him. And now I'm getting into, heavily armored dudes. You can sort of bat, cape, stun them. You can jump on dudes and knee them in the head. And there's some more cinematic moments where you're like, where is she? You can grab them and interrogate them and punch them in the face. And it's so cool. So yeah, it's definitely rule of cool. I'm not saying that the punch up is bad. I think it's probably as well implemented as it could be. I guess maybe I'm a little hung up. The counter doesn't seem to work quite so well unless I throw my arm out really far. So that seems a little bit hit and miss. But in the scheme of things, that's only one tiny part of an overall whole. The story is really interesting. I don't even want to talk about it very much, but it's pretty compelling. Chasing a dude called the Rat King. I don't know if he's made up or he's from the comics. I don't really care, but they've got Riddler trophy, sort of mini puzzle-esque things. You got like propaganda radios you can pull out and you can smash his little tokens. So there's some collectibles. There's upgrade trees. Again, it's got everything you would expect from an Arkham game. It's got Predator mode, actually works really well. Again, someone who loves getting motion sick. Well, I don't love, but anyway, I think you get my point. And you can swing around on top and hang down and grab dudes, and it's really fun. It works really well. So I am soundly impressed. The soundtrack just makes it. The environments have that right sort of gloomy Batman Gotham feel, and I really just cannot wait to play more of this. So look, my position, my takeaway is it's been a while since I've been in VR. I love VR full stop anyway, but now there is a shift going on. And I know it might be a bit tired, but this might be a really good time to get into it if you have that kind of fuck you money to pick up a headset. Maybe follow suit with what I did. Again, we've talked about, I'm flirting with the idea of doing retro reviews on retro hardware, that sort of stuff, just a little bit of an addendum on the end. I kind of like the idea of playing a game as intended on the hardware it was made on and judging it as so, as opposed to trying to build a space-age computer just to get a few extra frames. And it's funny because that lines up with this. The idea of playing these native high-profile releases on the Quest 3 really quite appeals to me, and it's starting to help peel me away from being such a Steam-centric gamer. But anyway, just a thought on the end. Really cool, really great. I'm not turning into a VR channel, but these high-profile releases that are coming down the pipeline these next couple of months, I probably will cover, because I'm very enthusiastic about watching the industry move forward, and in a time where people are, rightly so, feeling that the AAA industry is kind of falling over and stagnating in traditional games, the VR industry looks like it's exploding and going in new directions, much like we've seen the indie scene. Anyway, I don't want to waffle. Let's leave it there. Might just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.